So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Main Street. Gary Allen with you. I know I've been missing for a number of weeks. I apologize. Jeffrey Mark has always done a great job. He will continue to fill in for me as time goes on. Yes, I still have this working here. The next week, they all get pulled, and then the denture comes in, but it's going to take a couple weeks for it to heal. I will be back next week with a show, and then after that, Jeffrey will be sitting in for a couple of weeks. So I am grateful for you to join us. If you wish to really comment, make comments about the show, you go over to www.twitch.tv/drinksjokes, capital N storytelling, and we will be able to answer your questions for you from an absolutely wonderful guest that I have on today. Her name is Jennifer Armstrong. She is a New York Times best-selling author. She has written a number of pop culture books, Mary, Lou, Rhoda, and Ted, which is about the Mary Tyler Moore Show. She's written a book about Sex and the City and Us, as well as Pop Goddesses. What is this? I never get this right. Pop Goddesses of Today, I guess would be the best way to put it. And she also has written a number of other books that we will get into as things move down. So without further ado, she's a New York Times best-selling author, also on Vice, New York Magazine, the BBC. She is acclaimed by everybody to be one of the finest journalists writing today. So would you please welcome Miss Jennifer Armstrong?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, hey, it is my pleasure finally getting you on. It's been a struggle. You've had a busy summer, and we're just so grateful to have you on the program. You have written some very eclectic books, primarily dealing with women in show business and show business in general. Was that something that interested you before you got involved? Coming out of Northwestern, I assume you studied journalism.
I did. It's true.
No, Gary, I studied accounting.
Could have been anything, but Northwestern is definitely known for that. So yeah, I mean, I have always loved pop culture in general. All of that, but I was always very into that stuff while I was growing up, like more than a normal average kid. Like I wouldn't just listen to an album and like it. I would go to the library and try to learn all about, the artist. I was really into it, or any of that stuff. Like I always wanted, I would read the TV guide from cover to cover. That was when you still got the physical TV guide. And so I would read it every week when it came, and I'd circle all the things I was going to watch. So I always loved kind of not just vaguely enjoying my pop culture, but really getting into it and learning all about it. So, combining that with just wanting to be a writer, this is where I ended up.
It's funny. I studied journalism, although I don't know if you call broadcast journalism the same as the journalism I grew up with. I'm much older than you. You're a much younger and a much prettier young lady than I am. I'm up there. Moses was the quarterback of my high school team. When I was in high school and everything, I didn't want to be a journalist. I wanted to be an airline pilot like my dad, but a few things happened that didn't happen. But when I remember journalists, they were newspaper people, magazine, periodical people. They weren't broadcasters necessarily. But today, when I went to the U, I studied broadcast journalism, and I had to learn how to write and understand how to economize my sentences and understand things. And then I made the terrible mistake of interning for Larry King, which really threw everything out the window, because then he Gary, you don't really need to study for anything. So, somebody just said, what did they just say? Oh, Jennifer is great. Her online workshop got me writing again. Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Who was that? Put that up there for us, would you, Tom? Tom is on his way to a celebration for his birthday today. He's 43 years old. Oh, there we go. Him. I don't know who that is. Do you see who that is? Oh, it's Jason. Jason. Yes. Jason is one of our talk show hosts, and he's actually one of the best in the business. I owe him a phone call a million times, but I've had so many medical things going on. I want to talk about journalism today. We talked about it before we went on the air. Have we lost our minds with journalism? Have they just, I just want to get it out there. If my credibility is shattered, I'll take the hit for a couple days and we'll move on. And I'm referring to a certain network, Fox network, that just, they don't care. And by the way, for those of you out there that are taking the animal, whatever it is, to cure your COVID-19, please get spayed and neutered. We would appreciate that very much at the same time. What are the young journalists such as you and your friends saying about the state of journalism today? Where is it going? Have we lost our minds? Have we gone off the edge? Are we ever going to get back?
I have no idea. I wish I knew. If I knew, I would fix it all and maybe be more wealthy. I'm not sure if that's true, but it's hard. It's a really hard time. I mean, not just in terms of broadcast journalism and Fox News, but the entire industry is in flux, and nobody, the entire online industry, no one really knows how to make money. So no one really knows how to pay journalists. So it's really, really hard for people to work and make a living as journalists these days, which is pretty heartbreaking when you grew up wanting to be one and planning that. And I never thought I was going to be incredibly wealthy doing this.
No.
But, I thought that I would be able to make a living. And
well, I mean, you seem to be doing okay. The one picture you sent me of you in a Rolls Royce was fabulous. I like that a great deal. The fact that you were able to pay for your own new CD being made, me and Madonna, it was fantastic. No, I just don't know if we've gone over the cliff journalistically, because with the invention of the internet, you got a lot of crazies on there saying the dumbest, stupidest thing. I'll give you an illustration. I live here in Central Florida in Brevard County, which is right on the coast. And they had a school board meeting the other day about masking or not masking, and the school board changed their mind that they're mandatory masking. And a woman said it was cruelty to her child to wear a mask. And the reporter said, "What's more cruel, ma'am? Your child wearing a mask for a couple of weeks to a month until this subsides a little bit, or they get COVID and they die?" She immediately put her hand up and said, "I don't want to talk to you anymore." And she said she gets all her information from Fox News and on the internet. I mean, there's no journalistic integrity anymore. Nobody fact checks. I mean, when you did your books, I'm positive you fact checked 2 and 3 and maybe 4 times before you put it on paper to publish.
Yes, and I'm sure that I'm not perfect, but I certainly, I've hired people to do fact checking for me, and I usually, I source everything and I do my own fact checking as well. It's really, really hard these days all around. There's like every possible way that journalism can be falling apart. It kind of is, and these all kind of feed on each other. The distrust, the lack of opportunities, the lack of integrity, all of those things go together, because it just makes it all very, very difficult to make this your life's work unless you're already independently wealthy and, can do this as your sort of like, as from a benevolent place. But it is just a lot harder to kind of cobble together a living doing this. And so that makes it harder, it makes it harder to keep up quality when that is the case. And we all end up having to do many, wear different hats, teach and do this and do this and do this, which I'm not complaining about my life, but it just, it really does make it hard to just kind of try to make this your life's work when there's so few jobs out there.
Yeah. It's like you're already jumping through hoops in your profession to begin with,
right,
to get where you want to be. And then these people make it more difficult with their lies and lack of credibility. And it makes it harder for the climb up the hill to get to that successful where you want to be. And I find it very difficult to believe that someone hasn't said, we're going to give Jennifer Armstrong an opportunity. Look at the books she's written. Look at the investigative reporting that she's done on all of these subjects, and your blogs and your articles that you've written. I mean, they're just fabulous.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know why somebody isn't out there grabbing you up and saying, we got to get her on CNN to be an entertainment journalist or something, compared to somebody. I mean, there's a woman who's on MSNBC has a new show with Shepard Smith. Shepherd is an old friend of mine from my days in South Florida, but Ashley Banfield, nice lady, really nice lady. And she classifies herself as the female Larry King. Now, I worked for Larry King. And you know what I'm going to say? She's no Larry King. I'm no Larry King. And I loved Larry. And I learned a lot from Larry. But she's no Larry King. I mean, you know, first of all, I prepare so Larry would be angry at me anyway. Let's get away from that for a second. Your approach to writing, whether you're writing a blog or an article, or whether you're beginning to get into the depths of writing a book, such as you did with Pop Star Goddesses, which is a very interesting, you know, I didn't get to read all of the books. I only got to read some blurbs, and I talked to some people about them and stuff. What's your approach? A, picking a subject, because we talked about maybe you'll do a book on MASH, but that's a long time coming. B, where do you begin? How do you begin with some of the people out there? Because I know you teach a course in writing, and we're going to get to that. Jason obviously took it, and Jason, God bless you. I hope you're okay up there in New York. What's your approach to this, and what do you go through to get where you need to be happy with what you're doing?
Anything else. It was really difficult process to get it, you know, to get to a point where I know what I'm going to write about and someone is paying me to do so. Because a lot of people are involved. It's not, you know, if I can't just do whatever I want because I want to, you know, unless I wanted to self-publish or something. So, you know, my agent has to be on board. My editors have to be on board. Someone has to want to pay me enough money and publish the book. So it's a pretty hard process where I come up with lots of ideas that I think are great. And, you know, a lot of them get shot down because of marketability and that kind of thing. And I kind of see my job as coming up with good ideas in the sense that I think this would make a great book. I can see what this book would be like.
Yeah.
Think that there is a story to be told, essentially. And then I sort of just bring it to those people and let them tell me, you know, whether or not they think they can market it and enough to pay me enough money to make this my next book deal.
And the key is marketing.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, you know, it really is frustrating because, like I said, I think I've had a lot of ideas that are really good that they do not necessarily think are marketable.
Okay. Give us some of those ideas that you had that they went, no.
I'm not going to tell you those because
why?
Because you never know. Ideas are never dead. So you can always go back to them. So I might still end up wanting to go back to them at some point. So I'm not going to tell you about those, but I can give vague examples, which is just that, you know, even like some of my books are about TV shows. I've written a book about the Mary Tyler Moore Show. I wrote a book about Sex and the City. I wrote a book about Seinfeld. And so we've gone through other TV shows where they just don't think they were popular enough, or they don't think people are still talking about them enough, or they don't think it's even the right kind of demographic that watched it, that they want to be able, you know, that they want to target with a book.
Yeah.
Or whatever, and you kind of feel like, oh, that's too hard to market because it's too broad, it's too big. It's much easier to say we're going to market this book to Seinfeld fans, you know. So Seinfeld is a great example of the opposite, which is the reason that worked is that was an incredibly popular show with a lot of fans. It continues to get new fans because it's in syndication and streaming, and its fan base is the kind of fan base that will buy a book about it. So those are the kinds of things that they're looking for. And so we kind of have to come together with me feeling like this is something I'm excited enough to do for, you know, I've been talking about Seinfeld now for, 5 years, you know, the book came out 5 years ago. So if it goes well, you're going to be talking about this stuff for a long time. You want to be into it. And then you want to have a story to tell over 300 pages. And then your publisher has to get on board with, is this something that they want to market? Right.
When you're writing a book, I've asked this of many authors that I've had on the program, and I always get a different answer in a way. When you're picking up a subject like Sex in the City or Seinfeld or women that made television or sex goddesses, whatever the case may be, how married do you get to the subject to the point where that's your single focus?
That's a really good question. I love that question. Because what I would say is
Larry King.
you get really into it. I mean, and like I said, the thing that I'm always telling people when they come to me for advice is like, you better be excited about, sometimes people will be like, should I write a book about this TV show, even though I didn't like it that much? It's like, well, no, because you're going to be really, you have to really get into it. On the other hand, like I've written 7 books. So it's hard for me to keep all the information in. But I can't be quizzed on like the minute details anymore. I can't tell you like Jerry's address in the show or something, because it's like I can only hold that level of information into my brain for like one book at a time, so Seinfeld isn't the only thing in my life, I guess is what I'm saying, though I certainly know a lot about it and love talking about it and love that book. So
all I can tell you is that wherever Jerry lived, it was rent control, because most comedians can't afford to live in the middle of downtown Manhattan. I can tell you that much right now. It's like Friends. Exactly. There's another book. That apartment that they live in would be like $5,000 now.
Yeah.
I mean, my apartment in Chicago, which overlooked Michigan Avenue, 535 North Michigan Avenue, that apartment is now going for $3,200 a month.
Yep.
And we only paid, my wife and I, $850 at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, so it is what it is. Let's talk about, you wrote an article, which I found quite fascinating. What pop stars can teach writers about failure. What can they teach them about failure?
Well, I wrote a whole essay about it. I wrote that essay when I had a book called Pop Star Goddesses that came out last year. Yeah. And what it really came out of it's a collection of like 35 mini essays about 35 different, what I called pop star goddesses. So semi-recent, like going back to about the 90s till today, women who are pop stars who we really look to as role models and who represent certain things. And so I was kind of looking at them through that lens. And while I was doing all of this, like I had to do research on every single one of these women to write each essay. And I was seeing patterns that happened over and over again. And the biggest thing was, and something that I took away from it for my own life, they had a moment where they were huge. And as they go through their careers, they also have inevitable dips after that. And, their kind of career is structured fairly similarly to an author's career. So it's like, because you're coming out with albums or books, there are these points at which you're going out into the world with your creative output to be judged essentially on both your creative and commercial success. And so you will inevitably have, very clear peaks and very clear valleys. And I was very interested in the ways that I saw these women, especially who have been around a little bit longer, deal with having been huge and also having the inevitable fall off. And that was what I took a lot of inspiration from, seeing women like that, like a Jennifer Lopez, or to some extent, even like a Celine Dion. All of these women, a lot of these women have had these kind of ups and downs. And I, really loved it, seeing that and realizing like they still kept going. They're still around. Right. People still love them and they're still being creative.
Jason wrote something. He said, I should write a book called Living as a Failure. You're not a failure, Jason. You're actually quite successful. I worked with Celine Dion.
Nice.
I opened for her once, and she was really nice. I just got tired of hearing about how it was all about Celine Dion. Do you think that, I mean, because I can run off a group of women that were important during my time growing up. Mary Tyler Moore, Carol Burnett, Lucille Ball, B. Arthur, Barbara Stanwyck of all people, Barbara Walters, Rosie O'Donnell, Dinah Shore. I don't know if you know who Dinah Shore was, right? Joan Crawford. She was the meanest of the mean. These were women who were very powerful women. Is there success like Jennifer Lopez and Shakira and Madonna? Which, by the way, I just want to remind everybody, you're watching Mainstreet. Jennifer Armstrong, author and writer, is joined us. She's written a number of books on pop culture. Gary Allen with you. I'll be with you next week. And then Jeffrey Mark will be taking over for a couple of weeks as I heal eventually someday. One of these days, I'll be whole again. Was it the time frame that those women that I just mentioned were in show business that held them back from controlling everything? I know that Lucille Ball has made it quite plain and simple that when she took over her new show and Desi and her had split, that after one reading and they sent the writers away and they came back and she started to get pretty authoritative, that's when her last name became a plural instead of a singular. And is it today because of Sex in the City? Because we're going to probably intertwine a lot of these shows. Is it because of what happened with Sex in the City? Is it because of the Me Too generation, which you wrote a wonderful article about how that show would hold up today with the Me Too generation? Is it that women are considered more intelligent than maybe 50, 60 years ago? And that's the wrong way to put it. And I apologize to all you ladies out there. I do. But I think Jennifer knows what I mean. Men have always thought of themselves as we are superior. What you think is not important, And is it possible that even as strong as those women were, men were still in charge, whereas we have evolved as a society where men have evolved and realized, wait a minute, these women have something to contribute. They have something to add. So now they're more in control of their careers and their shows than they were back then. Is that what these goddesses have managed to overcome, thanks to people that were on that list that I wrote, that I just mentioned?
I think that's probably true. I do think that these things build on each other. Hopefully, I hope things continue to progress. I don't know that that's always going to be true. But they're certainly doing better than we were in the 50s and 60s and 70s and even 80s, probably. I think there is progress, but there's also still plenty of work to do. And yes, it is absolutely because of women, all kinds of ballsy women like Lucille Ball, and like you said, you mentioned a bunch of them. That those things do, of course, build on each other. So that, for instance, like the Mary Tyler Moore show in its time really was like the show. That was the show that featured a woman, right? That was the feminist show, which people didn't even consider it feminist then, but that's a different story. But now we are lucky to have, probably partly just because of also streaming, which opened up just a lot of bandwidth opportunity. We have a lot more shows that are run by women, which is hugely important, run and created and written by women. So it allows for more kind of experiences to be reflected on our televisions rather than that one show having to stand in for all women, which is similar to Sex and the City. That too had a lot of pressure on it in its time because it was so groundbreaking and it was the show for women. Whereas now we can have lots of different kinds of women on television and you don't have to be like, oh, I'm watching the woman show. We can all see different kinds of experiences reflected, which is wonderful.
I think you can also see it in casting of the shows, the secondary roles, whereas years ago, the men were the lawyers, the men were the doctors, the men were the well, not the nurses necessarily, but judges and stuff on Law and Order. There's female judges. Now you start to see the casting where there's more women. Like my three favorite shows on television right now are the Chicago shows. Oh,
that's great.
And because you went to Northwestern University, how much, if you live in Chicago, you love Chicago. Although I'll admit from January to April, you can keep Chicago and I'll stay in Florida. Thank you very much. But you start to see these roles are coming more and more for women than they did back 50, 60 years ago. And men are sort of taking the back seat now. And I think it's wonderful. You know, my ex-wife, now passed on after we were divorced, she was an advertising executive. She started out at DePaul University as a part-time employee at J. Walter Thompson, and she worked herself up to administrator of the creative department. She was brilliant. She could walk into a car dealership and within 10 minutes tell you what's wrong, why you're not selling. She was brilliant. I learned more marketing from her and from my days in show business because, as you well know, Jennifer, if you don't hit the track running in show business, they'll run over you faster than anything in the world. How do these pop goddesses, how do these actresses stay away from that, getting run over? Or is it that they are so strong internally that they do the running over?
I mean, I think they're pretty strong. Another thing that I really learned, particularly from just doing that pop star goddess book, I think what was really striking that I didn't expect when I was going into it was just doing so many stories about so many women and seeing those patterns. And another thing that really comes up with women like that is just the ways that, you know, I think there's many of them have these sort of diva reputations, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is, if you do not become that diva, I think it's pretty hard. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think there might be some people who have made it through possibly being nice, but I kind of can't blame any woman in that business who has, you know, become that diva, because that is the only way you survive instead of, like you said, getting run over. So you see something like one of my absolute favorites of all time, Britney Spears, who has been back in the news this year. And to me, a huge part of what her story is about is actually about what a sweetheart she's always been. And I think that's why she got run over. It's amazing that she survived, and like both, you know, that she just survived. I think she's but you know, then you have somebody like a Christina Aguilera or a Mariah Carey, who is they're known for these kind of diva personalities. And the fact is, having recently read Mariah's biography, my God, she went through so much. How, you know, the only way that she could survive and keep doing and sharing her gift with the world was to really take charge of her everything, of her, you know, image, of her work. You know, otherwise doing what other people told her to do was just not going to work. She was not going to survive psychologically or in any other way.
I'll tell you one woman who's on television. I would imagine someday you're going to write a book about this, and that's Law and Order Svu. Mariska Hargitay. She is a sweetheart. Everybody that works with her. Ray Abruzzo, who is a dear friend of mine from The Sopranos, he said that he met her once, a couple times. They sat down. He said, Gary, she's a sweetheart. And now maybe in negotiations behind closed doors, she may be a little bit tougher with her lawyers and representatives. But when it comes to on the set and everything, she doesn't push her weight around. She's a goofball. She's actually a practical joker. And I think that probably a lot of the women that we go, oh, they're a diva, there's stuff like that. It's probably coming from men. I'm just saying this. That are insecure.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. I didn't care for years for female bosses when I worked in the Attorney General's office, because, well, number one, they went to Notre Dame, and you know, for those of us who lived in the Midwest, unless you're Irish, most Irish people have never even been to Notre Dame, and they get a little bossy. I like, you know, but it's okay. I adore women. I really do. It's too bad they don't like me much, but you know, that's another story for another time. And when I was doing Hill Street Blues, everybody, Betty Thomas was wonderful. She was just down the street working as a waitress at Second City, or at the Groundlings, where I went to school. You know, I went to the Groundlings with Costner and Saget. You know, and I mean, there's another show, Full House. You should do a program on. You know, I'm giving you all these ideas. You won't credit with anything. Let's talk a little bit. We have Jennifer Armstrong on with us today. She's an author and a writer. She's written a number of wonderful books. I'm going to try to get to them all here. The one about Mary Lou, Rhoda, and Ted. You know, I thought about that book the other day when Ted passed, And I thought, the only cast
Lou.
member that
Yes. Yes.
Lou,
Yes.
the only cast member I ever met was Ted Knight. I was doing a play with Jim J. Bullock, and he came. Now I met at the time he was doing the cartoon thing. What a nice man. Mary Tyler Moore, I met once. What a nice lady. Betty White, I never got to meet. I do know people that know her, and they all say she's a real sweetheart. Although here's a secret behind closed doors. She and B. Arthur did not get along.
True story. But I think Betty White really lives up to the hype in all of my experience anyway. She's
what, 99 years old?
99. She'll be 100 in January.
Oh God, you're listening to Mainstreet. Gary Allen, Jennifer Armstrong is my guest, and she's going to be coming back. Your website, please give it to everybody.
JenniferKArmstrong.com.
And let's talk about your writing career and your coaching. When someone wants to have because everybody thinks, like for instance, I have in my head 1,001 books. I wouldn't know where to begin. First of all, I suffer from dyslexia. So can you imagine an editor going through what in the name of God was he trying to say here? By the way, did you know that Stephen J. Canale suffered from dyslexia so bad that some days he couldn't spell cat?
Wow.
Jay Leno suffers from it. And Jay and I have been friends since we were little boys. I suffer from it. Most of mine is with math more than it is with writing, but I do have problems with it. As a writing coach, when someone comes to you, what do they get when they work with you on improving their career? Like Jason, the wonderful Jason, what do they get from you, and what do they take away, and how far can they go?
Well, when I do one-on-one stuff, it's kind of custom to some extent, of course, because they're coming to me for one-on-one help. But mostly, like, people tend to come to me, like you're saying, for help specifically with, like, I want to write a book. How do I do that? And I really love that. I love to help people, kind of navigate that system. It's crazy and hard, and I've done it a lot, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I like to kind of help people avoid some of those mistakes if I can. It's just, a lot of people have great ideas, are good writers, just don't know how to get into that system. And so I like to try to help people the best I can to do that. I've certainly taught workshops and all kinds of other things as well. I have some Skillshare classes where I teach like nonfiction writing and all kinds of different other things, just how to find your writing voice, smaller things like that. But, generally speaking, it's kind of like mostly focused on helping people to kind of actually launch that career, or even just the book idea itself, and figure out what to do with it and how to move forward with it.
What advice do you give to someone who wants to be a writer? What skill sets do they need to bring to the program?
I mean, I could be wrong. I'm sure there are people who want to be writers who really are terrible writers, but I think that most people are drawn to something because they have some aptitude at it. So I'm going to assume people have some basic aptitude for writing. There's something there, right? And then it just becomes, it's honestly a huge part of it is just endurance. It's just, keeping at it and handling rejection. I think it's very similar to show business in this way, that the people there's a little bit wrong with us, and we just keep at it and over and over, and we just say, okay, well, what about this? No, okay, what about this?
Yeah.
And that's really the key. It's hard. It's hard sometimes. Because and sometimes I wake up and say, like, I understand why people get real jobs, because that would be a little bit, the steady, just keep doing the same thing you're doing every day kind of thing, is appealing to me at times, because that would feel a little bit safer. But, you just have to if you really want to be in it, you have to deal with rejection, roll with it, just keep going. It's really hard, I know, but you have to sort of have faith in your own ideas and your own your own voice, all of that stuff, and it is really hard because of course we've all seen people where we're like, maybe they don't need to be doing that. And you're like, what if I'm one of those people? But most people who want to do this have something to say, have some aptitude, and it's just about figuring out how to channel that and then just keeping on going with it no matter what.
Yeah, it's amazing. As I said at the top of the program, I originally wanted to be an airline pilot like my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad has always, now my dad's been gone since 1999, but I took 10 years out of my life to take care of my mom and dad before they died. And I remember my dad saying to me one day, he said, I love all 9 of you. I had 9 brothers and sisters. I love all of you. And Michael being a professional football player, your sisters being psychiatrists and stuff, and Marvin this, and my brother Greg, who's a priest up in Boston. He's a Greek Orthodox priest. He said, but son, I was never so proud in my life as the day you decided not to be an airline pilot anymore. He said, he said, now you know how to fly, you flew in the Air Force and all that other stuff, but my vision was starting to go as it continues to do at the age of 68 years old. So, it's like whatever. By the way, Jason wanted to comment that he doesn't think you have an ego of any kind. And Jason doesn't have an ego either. So
that's well, just keep right on going.
Do you ever take on a student and then eventually say, maybe the 7-Eleven is a good place for you, or by the way, I can't stand 9-to-5 work.
I really can't either, which is why I end up not actually doing that. But I see the appeal of it sometimes as well.
Oh no, there's never appeal to it. No, it's boring. It's not. It doesn't do anything for me. I've had to do it from time to time to survive when you're in this business. Unless you get very, very, very lucky. But how can people get a hold of you to get involved with if they want to write a book and they want to take some lessons from you or get some advice from you? How can they get a hold of you?
You can come to my website, jenniferkarmstrong.com. There's a bunch of information about this there. And certainly there's also just like basic contact information there. So more than you could possibly want to know about me is available at my website.
And there is a beautiful picture of her on that website, of her with her glasses on, and she looks so studious, She looks, hello there, yes, I'm here in English class 101. Yes, they're having fun today. Absolutely. All right, so now we've come to we're not going to get to Seinfeld right away. We got a few minutes before we'll get to him. But we've now come to the elephant in the room, the show that I never watched, but yet I know about a number of the characters, and that's Sex in the City. This is another show that you write about, that you say that at its conception, they never thought it would be what it is and what it became. Like Seinfeld, you wrote, it was a show about nothing that became everything. But I always say about Seinfeld, it wasn't a show about nothing. It was a show that showed us how silly we are.
Yep.
With the little things that bug you, which we will get into later. Did Sex in the City have the same effect with women? Don't sweat the small stuff. If we stick together and work hard, we can get where we want to be. And we are a club. We are a group. We can do what we need to do.
I think that is a huge part of Sex and the City, and actually sometimes gets lost in all of the other stuff about Sex and the City, is that like it's mostly about female friendship. It's not, of course it's also about like romance, and it's also about fashion and shoes and things like that. But I think at its best moments, and I think at its core, it was really about those 4 women and their relationship with each other, which is kind of weirdly similar to even Seinfeld, right? To some extent, It's really about the core 4 people, their relationships, and kind of what they mean to each other.
Now, the only person I ever met from that cast was Mr. Big, Chris Noth.
Yeah.
I because he was on Law and Order, and he worked with Jerry Arbach, who I loved very, very much. I love Jerry Arbach. I never got to meet him, but everybody talks about him. But I do know about Kim Cattrall. Now, there are rumors that they're going to do a movie. Apparently, Sarah Jessica Parker did a late night talk show. I don't remember which one it was. It was a while ago back. And she said, yes, we are going to do the movie, but Cattrall's character will not be involved in the movie because she continues As a matter of fact, since that show went off the air, Jennifer, has Kim Cattrall done anything else?
She has done things. They are doing a reboot television series, which they're shooting right now and will air imminently. They haven't given us a date at HBO, but like it'll be soon. So this is happening. It's real. And Kim Cattrall's character is not in it because she did not want to sign on to do it. But this is absolutely something that
any thoughts on why she doesn't want to do this?
Oh, because she said she just didn't want to, she didn't want to do it. She is done doing Sex in the City. I mean, I can sort of understand this. I can understand both sides, right? Part of you as a fan, especially, and then we also look from the outside and say, my God, but I also understand, like, what if somebody came to you, 10, 15, 20 years after you finished some job and said, do you want to go back to 7-Eleven? And you're like, no, I'm not. So I completely understand. Either I think it's really hard to honestly from the outside understand these things at that level. The same way that Jerry Seinfeld turned down something like $5 million an episode to do another season of Seinfeld at the end, and everybody's like, you're crazy, and it's like, but he has enough money, so he's not crazy. It's all relative. And
hey, what's up with that? What's up with that? I mean, I can understand how she feels, but to do one reboot just one time, which I guess it is it going to be a series or just one show and that's it?
It's multiple episodes of a season of a series. Who knows if they'll go past one season, but I mean, it's also like they have been honest at this point about the fact that she did not get along with the others as much as one would hope, and that is part of this decision as well. Like this is public knowledge at this point. And you can understand, I guess, especially how if someone came to you 10 or 15 years later and said, do you want to go back and work with these people you didn't really like? You might not want to, no matter how much money is involved.
I don't want to work with me again.
Exactly.
I don't want to work with me again.
Right.
Well, for Kim, there's always Porky's.
Yes, if there's a Porky's reboot, perhaps she will be interested in that. But
Scott Cullenby, who was in Porky's, who was a friend of mine, he said she was just not nice to get along with. She just was not, she really, I don't know. She's just not nice to get along with. You wrote an article about back for 2018. How would that show stand up today?
Mm-hmm.
How would it stand up 2021 with the Me Too generation and everything we've gone through since that show left the air? Plus, I would imagine Sarah Jessica Parker's shoe collection has probably increased by 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 shoes. I couldn't believe a Jimmy Choo shoe is $600, and that was a bargain basement shoe.
Yep.
I listen. I've paid as much as $2,000 or $3,000 for a suit that's tailor made, but I've never paid that much for a pair of shoes. $600. My God. So give us some inside sizzle.
I am very interested to see how it goes. I mean, I know that's not very inside, but I think this is one of the biggest pop culture highwire acts that we're going to see soon, because the world has changed so much in the last year / last couple years / definitely last 10 to 20 years. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's a totally different world from the world that Sex and the City came into, that it really revolutionized. It did so much that it almost made itself irrelevant in mm-hmm. terms of the depiction of women on television. So it's going to have to change with the times. And the thing that I will say is just that the people involved with this are very, very smart people, and they know that everyone is going to be coming for them if they don't do it right. Right. And so it's going to be so interesting to see how they take this show that was about women in a specific time. These women have aged. First of all, the actual characters and the actresses have aged. So they're mm-hmm. going to be tackling different topics just because of that. It's right. Not as much of a glamorous time at all. I mean, this is the time of masks and.
One of your characters actually came true in real life. Miranda ran for governor of the state of New York in real life.
Yep.
She did a Law and Order where she played a schizophrenic with like 20,000 different personalities. What do you think? All right. Well, before, what do you think? Give us some inside gossip, because we're going to go to Seinfeld here real quick. Give us an inside gossip thing that you learned, that you heard about before you start writing the book, and then you went, "Oh, that's true." Anything you want to pick?
I mean, the few about the whole control with the rest of the cast thing, and like my boring insider scoop, honestly, is that everyone else I talked to for that book
Yeah.
had a great experience. They really, like, Sarah Jessica is the sweetest, nicest person possible ever,
Yeah.
ever. Like, all the other people who worked with her just wanted to talk to me about how nice she was.
Right.
And she lived up to that hype. It was really fun to dive into that show. That show meant a lot to me specifically during that time in my life. So it was a particular, I mean, that's true of all of my shows, you know, in different ways, but it was just it was like a really special experience to, you know, talk to those people and really dig into kind of this show that meant so much to me and really shaped my own experience of moving to New York at the time that the show was still on.
I know that we're not gonna get to the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which means you got to come back. But I know how Oprah felt about Mary Tyler Moore. I know that there was some anniversary show for Oprah, or the last show for Oprah, and they kept Mary hidden in a hotel in Chicago. I hope it wasn't the Sheraton across the street from where I lived on Michigan Avenue. But anyway, they kept her hidden, and then they told her to sit in the chair, and they just told her to sit there and wait, and they played the music. And I even cried for her, because out comes Mary Tyler Moore. She almost jumped out of her skin. She jumped out of her skin with seeing Mary Tyler Moore. It's an amazing, she never met Mary Tyler Moore before. It was just amazing to me. Let's move on here real quick to Seinfeld, a show about nothing that became everything, that I thought really was a show that taught us, as I said earlier, about how petty we are as little people. I saw a Seinfeld show the other day that Jerry was shaving, and he noticed his hairline on his chest wasn't even, and he ended up shaving his entire chest. And the episode was about him going out with his girlfriend to the beach and stuff, and he couldn't do that. Kramer, who, by the way, the real guy, which you can talk, he gives tours in New York of
the real Kramer. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What was his famous line? Giddy up. Yeah, giddy up. He was an opportunist. Everything that came along, from the puffy shirt to this to that. Oh, it's going to make millions, Jer. Oh, it's going to make millions. And then by the way, do a lot of people know that Julia Louis-Dreyfus, before she ever even got to be 10 years old, was a millionaire?
Mm-hmm.
Do people realize that her family is the Dreyfus Fund?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, she's a really nice lady, and she's
is
a wonderful, wonderful actress. And then, of course, there's George, who couldn't keep a job if his life depended on it, and he was either always moving back home to his parents' home or something else. Talk about what it is you wanted and why you wanted to write this book, and what you learned about the cast and behind the scenes that made it so delicious for you to write.
I had written the book about the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and we were basically kind of looking for the same, you know, let's do that trick again, but with a different show. And it just seemed obvious at the time that, like, if a book hadn't been written about Seinfeld, it should be, you know, if there is a show that lives up to the book treatment, Seinfeld is certainly one of them, especially in terms of comedy. This would be it, you know.
Yeah.
One of the, like, it might be the biggest. I'll just go ahead and make that argument, since I wrote a book about it. It's probably the biggest, you know, story in television comedy. It's the last big show. It's the last show that, like, we all love. That and Friends. I mean, Friends kind of, like, its finale was later because it started later. But right around that time, this was the last era of mass television. And so the fact that this could have 40 million people watching, you know. It was just a huge, huge, huge mass hit. Everybody was talking about it the next day. You had to watch it on Thursday night because we couldn't record things and we weren't streaming. It was on Thursday night. You had to watch it when it aired so that when you went to work or school on Friday, you would understand what everybody was talking about. And that, to me, there was so much there. Plus the fact that it was this show that should not have worked, essentially. And many times was almost canceled before it became that mass hit. So there's a lot of story to be told there. And how did this incredibly quirky, seemingly very niche show that famously the NBC executive said was too New York and too Jewish to ever be a mass hit? And then it was, because no one cared. It was just funny. And so, all of that sort of lent itself to the book treatment. Plus, to me, the kicker on all of this is the incredible lasting fandom of this thing. It actually got bigger after it went off the air. It got bigger and bigger because it was in syndication. And it is famously, the biggest syndication deal ever. They've made gazillions of dollars on this. And it's now coming to Netflix on October 1st. Mm-hmm. So I think another new audience is going to find it, which is really exciting. So it's just one of those things. It became like the part of the fabric of our lives. People quote it constantly. Sometimes people don't even know they're quoting it because it has become such common, it puts so many different phrases into our
yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all
there's
that
anything
other
wrong
stuff.
with that, real and spectacular, blah, 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 all of that
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, I talked to a young woman who told me that for years she was celebrating Festivus in college and didn't realize it wasn't a real holiday. She had no idea it was from Seinfeld. She said, I thought it was some Greek holiday or something.
Jerry Seinfeld, Jerry Stiller. Oh God. Jerry was something else. He was really something else. But the thing is that Larry David, who and Jerry, who wrote the book, Carol Leifer, who I know, who was one of the writers on the program. But what I want to know is, going in, you heard stories, you heard rumors. Talk about a rumor or two. By the way, Jennifer Armstrong is our guest here on Main Street. Gary Allen. We got about 10 more minutes to go. Tell us about some of the rumors that you heard about that turned out not to be true, and things you learned that turned out to be true. I
can't quite remember if there's something that turned out not to be true exactly. Certainly, actually, this is another one. I feel like I'm so lame. I'd be the worst guest on a gossip show, because I'm going to again say that one of the things that strikes me about that cast is actually they too seem like they got along really well. And you mentioned Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She is one of the nicest people I've ever met on the planet, just like Sarah Jessica. I think Jason Alexander strikes me as an incredibly sort of sweet, menschy person too. Yeah. And that fascinated me only because I think it's very interesting how those two in particular are so good at playing kind of terrible people. And I think that my theory is, anyway, that because they're such good people in real life, there's the core of that is there. And then they can kind of act terrible on screen, but we still think, there's some core of goodness there. We still really like them. And so it seems like they all really got along well in playing these awful people, and I think it's really funny, and it's really interesting that I guess to do it that long, you have to be enjoying yourself. But
yeah, it's interesting how insecure Jerry was. And in real life, he's far from that. He's far from an insecure individual. Now, the gentleman who played Kramer, of course, none of these people, ever have to work again a day in their life. No. I mean, they're going to get residuals, I guess, forever. I mean, well after they're gone, their estates will be getting residuals. But it's too bad what happened to Michael. It's too bad that evening occurred at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles. I feel bad because I know people that know him, and he's not a racist by any stretch. I think he was getting frustrated because Michael was never a stand-up comic. Mm-hmm. Michael was a comedic actor. Right. Like Jason is a comedic actor. Right. Jerry's the stand-up comic.
Right.
Julia was a comedic actor on Saturday Night Live.
Right.
Michael was never a stand-up comic that I'm aware of. Now,
Right.
maybe Jason, who's watching in, can confirm or deny that, but or tell me that I was wrong. But he was never a comedian in that sense of the word. He's a comedic actor. So I felt bad for him because I know what it's like to be on stage and you fail, you bomb, and it's not a nice feeling. And it gets. Yeah, he had, as Jason just said, he had road rage, and he did, and he went crazy, and he went nutsy. Is there going to be a chance for a movie, Seinfeld?
I don't think so. I could be wrong. I absolutely could be wrong about this. But they have a lot of money, and so the money thing is not going to get them there.
Yeah.
And I think they are particularly and correctly protective of their legacy. That's why Jerry turned down $5 million a week to keep doing the show when he quit, because he said we're done. If we keep going, it's not going to be as good.
Yeah.
And I think that was so smart, because to me, that's what ends up making it really valuable in syndication, because everybody loves almost every episode. And if you had that thing that a lot of them have, which is a couple of dud seasons toward the end, it ruins it. And so this makes it this like commodity that everyone wants. Netflix just backed up the money truck again to put it on Netflix. And they did a really, really brilliant arc on Curb Your Enthusiasm, where they reunited. And that was like a perfect way to me to do a Seinfeld reunion of sorts, is to do it on Curb with this kind of knowing farcical element to it. And so sure, they might, and I bet if they came up with a good idea, I think they would do it. But Larry just decided Curb's back, so you never know. But I think they are so protective, and also pretty proud of what they did, and also tons of money. So it's not, unless they also are still getting roles. That's another thing. Like, Jerry's happy on the road. He doesn't really want to, necessarily be on screen. And Julia is a genius and probably the best or one of the best comedic actors currently working. So she's fine, so she doesn't need this. And, so I think those factors are all the things that you need to think about when you think about why people come back together, like a Sex and the City, to reboot it or to do a reunion or any of that. But I just think they're too, they're too sort of like proud to mess with Seinfeld, because so many times we've seen them cut these shows come back. Yeah. And it tarnishes it's either not good, or we learn some new unsavory secret about, like Roseanne. Often it's better to just leave it alone.
I'm good friends with Kevin Costner, and I said to him, "Why didn't you ever do a Dances with Wolves 2?" He said, "Why? The first one was good enough."
Exactly.
And Francis Ford Coppola said about the Godfather trilogy, he said, "I should have stopped at 1."
Yeah, it's exactly it. And we were even saying about Sex and the City, like, maybe they're going to come back and do something brilliant, but it's of its time. Seinfeld is of its time. So 4 people being jerks in New York City may not play the same way now if they were doing it in current time. It's fun to still watch.
Yeah.
And so would do in a pandemic or something, kind of. So it's hard to know.
All right, we've got a minute left. What has Jennifer Armstrong, and by the way, thank you so much for being with me for the hour. I got to have you back as soon as all this medical stuff gets going. What has Jennifer learned about herself through all these books that has made her a better person than she was before?
That's a good question. I think that I've learned, I'll talk about sort of what I've learned from the content and doing, especially multiple books about big TV hits and that sort of thing. Is just kind of similar to, what I've learned is that it's very, very special when these people have something big, to have something work, to have any kind of success. And it's usually a very specific time in life, and it comes and goes, and then later they want to all come back and do the reboot because it was the best time of their lives and they didn't realize it at the time. So I think something, is just a life lesson is that when those things happen, you just have to enjoy them and take them as they are, and they're not going to be there forever. So that's what I've learned from my TV books anyway.
Jason says an animated Sex and the City where they solve mysteries would be a good idea.
Why not? That's what I say.
Jason's brilliant. Jason's brilliant. I mean, he is just, I mean, I shouldn't even be doing the show. I should have Jason do it. Him and Jeffrey Mark should be able to do this. Folks, we've had an interesting hour. It's been a great hour with this young lady, Jennifer Armstrong. Thank you so very much. Thank you, all of you out there. And please go and get one of her books, whether it be Pop Star Goddesses, Sex and the City and Us, Mary Lou, Rhoda, and Ted. We didn't get to Mary Tyler Moore, but we will next time, I promise. But I want to thank all of you for joining us. Jennifer, thank you again so much for taking the hour out of your life to join us here on this program. Okay, her computer's kind of acting up a little bit right now, but I want to thank all of you for taking the time. I'll be back next week with another guest, John Cabal. He's a jazz artist. He has a couple of new CDs out, and Jennifer is going to sing us out here. Happy birthday from our new Madonna CD. It's been a running gag for most of the program. But thank you all very much for joining us. Please, until next time, please wear a mask, get vaccinated, take care of yourself and each other. Until next week, take care. Bye-bye. See you on Main Street at 4 p.m. next Friday.